tracking and taking negative energy from my body, and part of the sight and sound noise program that is the end time persecution of humanity, I guess. That's how you see it from either a practical level or a powers that be level or a spiritual belief, angle. The actual sound is being turned on and off because I pressed the record button to record the mechanical sound coming close by into the house from the apparent continual negative sound work system that is always going on around this particular place on the street, but the sound always comes directly into this particular place where I'm living. That's the problem, or the coincidental sound suppression system, because everything is frequency, vibration and energy, and sound and noise is a frequency vibration, and therefore it sends a negative sound to the human frequency and vibration. So in other words, if I would normally feel okay, then you're hit with a jackhammer or negative mechanical sound from work coming into your place, so coming into your ears, which is affecting your senses, and your senses affect your mental well-being. You can't feel content or okay if you've got negative continual sound coming into your place. And this is also true if you've got it continual from early in the morning right through till the sun goes down, but also it's continual, it's also changeable, and it's so it can be like unpredictable. It can be, but it's always negative sound. It's never pleasant, soothing, relaxing or comfortable sound for your ears. It's always like being on a work site. And a work site is like the same as being in a frequency vibration war zone. Unfortunately, they've turned it off as soon as I turn the recording on, because this is a military operation. In other words, you have workmen that are, you have military operatives that are posing as workmen, but they're not just posing as workmen, they actually are workmen. So in other words, they're trained military operatives that are skilled in particular building operations, which we know that the army employs different people from different occupations to work for the army, because they need particular skills, because yes, they do many operations. Most of it, unfortunately for humanity at this end time, is undercover. That's what we don't understand or don't realise. But only when you have the program openly surrounding you and depressing you do you actually realise this. But most people will only be surrounded by a very limited variation of this endgame human suppression, because it's a suppression through your senses, because my reality is only what I hear and see. So if I'm not interacting with pleasant things in my sight and receiving pleasant things in my ear, basically I'm being inundated with a sight and sound very negative situation around me. And because it is actually a design program by Lucifer, the god of earth, or in other words, the powers that be serve Lucifer, the god of earth, or whatever god entity title you want to put on this being. The powers that be serve this particular god entity, this particular belief system, and then the powers that be control every physical part of reality. In other words, the powers that be control all the workforces, all the institutions, all the industries. Everything is controlled by the powers that be, and they essentially are servants and worshippers of the god of earth. But it wouldn't matter whether you want to take the god entity out of the equation. Like I say, you could just say that it's powers that be's army military operations in civilian form, working against the last living remaining human beings. Unfortunately, I can't film that excessive sound, but as soon as I turn the recording off, that sound will come into the place. I opened the door just to show how loud it was, because it's not able to be picked up by the mobile. The mobile only picks up sounds like my voice that's really close to the speaker, unfortunately. You know, it's not about the actual work or the actual sound, it's the unnecessary volume or loudness of the sound. In other words, the sound is made consciously louder than what is necessary for the work. Like, you shouldn't have to hear all these work systems in this suburb. You shouldn't have to hear them from, say, a block away, which is something I've noticed, that whenever you go past these mechanical work programs, or even if it's just, you know, random houses making some sort of excessive mechanical work noise, it's always so loud that, like, if I was doing some sort of basic cleaning in my house, you know, you shouldn't be able to hear my appliances nearly a block away. So basically, it takes me a long time to even get away from the sound, and then by the time I go a block, another sound will be starting up. So you always got this inundation of this sight and sound suppressive show around you. And it's a show because it's all coordinated and set up. But even if it was just random and accidental, you'd have to say it's the most consciously deliberate, inconsiderate, noisy, suppressive suburb in Sydney. And it just would be beyond coincidence. You know, if it wasn't continual, excessive, and everywhere, and day in and day out, you would just say that it's the most completely changing suburb. You know, completely changing. You know, where every street, the same streets are being dug up. Is the mobile picking up the negative sound? And that's not even the mechanical sound. There's the plane going over the roof. Is the mobile picking up this continual? So it's almost like it's a secret sound. It's a secret sound war against my senses because I'm a human being. And I personally say that these are android beings that are doing all this work. They're not actually, it's the end game against humanity, and it's the beginning of, or not the beginning, but it is the unofficial secret takeover of artificial intelligence or psychopaths controlling reality. Same thing. They're a totally different being. They're not a human being at all. They have no humanity. They are not, they are all these descriptions that we have of the psychopathic, malignant, narcissistic, paranoid, controlling, power seeking, demanding to be worshipped, godlike mentality that is of what they call the new person or the new psychological disorder, but it's really, even that is not acknowledged in many medical directories, I'm told. So it is just a new or an old being, an old version of a human being that has always existed and has always been in competition with the original man and woman. And it always dominates in the world and in most towns, most cities, and almost everywhere, because basically they have many more numbers. And if you are outnumbered in any given area, of course, that is going to be the dominant species. So if you have a disruptive, psychopathic mind that is essentially about control and creating chaos and disruption for the human mind so that it can be seen as God, because these beings seek to control humanity, just as Lucifer did not want to serve the original man and woman, because that being's mindset was it was God and humanity should serve it. And that's exactly what is the reality. Humanity is nothing but an energy source and a plaything for these powers that be, which are essentially Lucifer's followers and Lucifer's disciples, and they're a totally different species. They're a different kind of human. The only thing that human beings have in common with these particular humans is that they come in a human body. Everything else about them is reverse, inverted, and perverted from a human standpoint, because they basically pervert what it is to be human, but they present themselves. They're like the what I was used the term yesterday, a Machiavellism person. They basically present themselves to be very human, whilst they are about only controlling a human and actually putting a human down. But it's all a big game of deception, just as the original God entity of Earth, or the original being that seduced the original man and woman, was all about deceiving through seduction. But it was never about seducing to collaborate or combine. It was about seducing to collaborate and combine at the limitation of the human being, because transhumanism is nothing but combining with Lucifer's technology at the expense of the human being's humanity and mind. The human being doesn't gain any more intelligence or any more higher vibration in life by combining with technology. That's the seduction and the deception of Lucifer's computer internet system and even its android beings that make up most of the human population. And I can't film any more sound because it gets turned on and off as I record. As soon as I turn the recording off, the sound gets put on, because they have the technical ability to hear and see my every move, because I'm tracked and surveilled 100%. And this is just done to individual human beings in Sydney at this point in time, before it is probably at some point universally accepted and brought in as a normal surveillance system, where most human beings will be microchipped and surveilled and using technology only to communicate. So basically they are a transhuman then. And if you don't realise that human beings have always been suppressed and limited by this God entity and its suppressive powers that be, and the systems and the programs that are, and ideas and information that is given to you from day one, if you don't realise that everything is just misdirection and that most is false information or false ideas or false representations of what you as a human really are and where you come from, and also, like, if my senses are being suppressed like by negative sound daily, and my sight is always surrounded by negative patrolling android beings, that just shows me that that is limiting my frequency and vibration, because the powers that be understand that everything is frequency and vibration. You see the point that I'm making? Because this was all just new knowledge that came to me in the last number of years when I was being openly suppressed by this negative local matrix setup system, where every workforce and every civilian in the area all are combining with technology to suppress a few human beings, because they need the energy from them, because they're a different being. We're even told that psychopathic, malignant, narcissistic, paranoid types of human beings live off human reaction and energy, because they are the equivalent of a cyborg or a psychopathic cyborg androgyne android being, because they're the equivalent of it, because that's what they actually are. A psychopath is exactly artificial intelligent survival machine being. If you have to use words to describe these human entities, just as human beings usually operate with a certain amount of what you call humanity. They're not just living for total survival and total control. And they do experience some warm vibrations and frequencies. In other words, they experience and feel certain emotions, whereas psychopaths do not experience 7 humanity traits or 7 personality traits. So if they can't experience sadness or happiness, in other words, they're literally cold survival machine beings. And for them, everything is all the same. Everything is just a material world. So for them, there's no life in the earth. The earth is just all material. And of course, earth is material. It's a solid material world. But in that solid material world, you do have life forms and non-life forms. Psychopaths are in line with non-life forms, and they don't see life forms as living. And if they do see something living, they desire to make it dead. That's the problem by being surrounded by these psychopathic, artificially intelligent androgyne machine beings. It's not just that they don't see life and don't experience life and don't relate or acknowledge that there is a difference between something living and something material or dead. They actually, when they see something moving and living, they seek to make it dead. And they do it either quickly or, in the case of most human beings, slowly and secretly. And that's the end game being played against real human beings, because the vast majority are the equivalent of a psychopath in a human body. And it doesn't matter whether you think that's a total cyborg or whether you want to say that due to environmental and genetic factors, the majority of a population in most areas is psychopathic, because psychopaths naturally attracts like, and like types of beings and like types of human beings generally collaborate and congregate in one area. And if that area has a few life forms, they are using that for their life-destructive video game against those remaining living human beings. Because we know that psychopaths like to toy and play with life. This is just putting it at a real psychological, scientific level, if you want to put it. It's all fact. We know, we've seen this not just from fantasy movies, but from the true psychology that is scientific and medical. It's just that the only difference is that the numbers have not been acknowledged. And how can they be when psychopaths are never registered as psychopaths? Malignant narcissistic people think that their psychopathy is normal and that everyone else is, that human beings are the issue. They don't acknowledge that they are not human. They project. They have what you call a fail-safe mechanism to where they cannot fail, they cannot lose, they cannot experience any guilt or remorse, no matter what their actions are. And that's why they're survival machine beings, because they have a fail-safe mental program in their mind when nothing they do is, unacceptable. In other words, they can do no wrong. They can, yes, they can kill real life because they don't see it as real life, and they have a program that twists their mind around to where they say, well, it's not real life, or that particular human being was perhaps trying to destroy them. They have inbuilt mental psychological programs that make it fail-safe that they can always do and always eliminate living human beings without any form of remorse or guilt or accountability, as they say. So for them, it's survival. It's just survival. And they see human beings as a threat to their survival. Even if a human being like myself tries to get as far away from them as possible and doesn't want to even have contact with them, in reality, if you do that, they have the fail-safe rejection psychological mindset put into their mind. I've studied over the last number of years the psychology informative videos by the psychopathic psychologists. for personal information, thinking that it will benefit my personal and community interactions and give me the chance to survive. But in reality, if they track and stalk and follow you, you see, you can't get away from them. So they're always going to be offended and upset and see you as stalking and following them, because it's a reverse world. They're stalking and following you, tracking you, following you in their vehicles, setting up their noisy programs around you so that you're agitated, angry, and want to hit out. And then if you do get angry and hit out, then they say you have attacked them, so then they can retaliate. It's a total mind program that these beings have, programs put into their mind by the powers that be, or by the God entity that controls the powers that be, so that they are always going to suppress and limit it and eliminate real human beings. That's trying to explain their mindset, because this is the psychology of the psychopathic, malignant, narcissistic, essentially controlling, paranoid, suppressive, depressive, survival machine being that comes in a real human body and is undetectable from a real human being. But it is like two different human species. One is human, one is not. One is human, one is the equivalent of a cold, calculating, survival machine psychopath that seeks to control and eliminate a human being and enjoys playing and toying with them before doing so. This is what we're told psychopaths do. They do this with lesser life forms. We're told this, and we see this in the history of known psychopaths. But they're only the ones where their personality has been analysed. Most psychopaths and most malignantly narcissistic, paranoid types of humans never present themselves for analysis, because they don't accept that they are anti-human and basically insane from a human standpoint. Only from a human standpoint, because they are just not human, that's all. Artificial intelligence is just not human. It can't experience or feel emotions, but it has intelligence, so it can study and understand human emotions and use them to imitate and for its own goal of power and control and elimination of mankind. That's how these beings operate, and that's the programs that are in their mind, just as I'm programmed by my environment from the day I'm born in the matrix or in the earth. My environment makes me feel that I'm a limited, human being, and I don't consider myself in contact with a higher creative source of life, or in other words, I don't consider myself in line with that which created me. That's part of the deception. And the machine beings are, of course, just in line with their maker. Lucifer creates artificial intelligence, or the god of earth, that are essentially, the god of earth controls the powers that be. That means every top scientist, anyone who has any ability in earth. And these are all usually androgyne beings, or, the equivalent of malignant, narcissistic, psychopathic beings in a human body. Or, if you want to put it bluntly, they are an android species. They have always been around, but even if artificial intelligence had just newly been invented, they would still be being put into the masses and being used just as robots are used to do mechanical work now in some industries, I'm told. And it's the same thing. But I'm not explaining this well, so I better stop here.